Hello and welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm Bill Freilich from WTCM Radio News. It's our weekly roundup of some of the stories making headlines across northern Michigan. And this week I'm joined by Peter Payette from Interlochen Public Radio. Peter, thanks for coming back in.
Hi, Bill.
Good to have you with us. Of course, elections are the big story of the week. You and I both a little weary this morning as coming off a busy week. Yeah. Tell us, let's start with kind of the top of a lot of people's minds this week has been the mayor's race in Traverse City. Mike Estes against Rick Buckhalter and one official write-in candidate. Any thoughts out of the gate on that?
John Reed.
John Reed, yeah. And then George Galyubovkis, the self-proclaimed, I think he calls himself homeless Dell, who wasn't eligible to officially, win should he have even received the votes. But your first thoughts out of the gate, were you surprised by the results?
I guess it fell about the way I thought it would. And I don't think people thought Rick Buckhalter was a viable candidate. In the run-up to the race, groups that held a few groups that held forums with candidates because there were so many commission candidates. They decided to lop off the mayoral candidates. Rick Buckhalter complained about this, and I think the reason you do that is those groups thought we have so many people to hear from, and this is just not a real race, because I just don't think many people took Rick Buckhalter seriously, although he did get 37% of the vote.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't necessarily a bad showing. I guess I was kind of surprised that John Reed as a write-in didn't get more than 200 and some votes. Now, a month ago, I wouldn't have been surprised by that, but just given what happened with the mayor, I was surprised that there
Right. It was a little late. John hadn't done much in his commission candidacy. I did a piece where I focused on traffic problems in the city, and I invited all the candidates to then respond with their thoughts in a web article. He never responded at all to me. He didn't even acknowledge the first email to the group saying, this will be happening. I encourage you to come on and give your ideas for the city. So, for instance, Ross Richardson, he responded to the initial email. He said thanks. He never posted anything on the page, which was fine, but I at least heard from him. John, I didn't hear a word from. I saw at the League of Women Voters site when I was getting some information at one point, everybody had provided the information for that page except John Reed. His page was blank. So I don't know exactly what he was doing out there to make his name and positions known to city voters. But
what do you take away from, I guess, the results, and do you dare speculate on what happens next? I mean, there's talk that the mayor may still end up resigning and leave it to the city commission to fill the spot temporarily, to hold a special election. I mean, all sorts of possibilities remain. Just because he won doesn't mean he's going to necessarily stay in office two more
Right.
years.
I was a little surprised he wasn't talking on Tuesday night. He didn't respond to my request for an interview when the vote count was in.
Right.
I sort of half expected him to have commented to the Record Eagle. He seems to have a pretty good relationship with the local newspaper. So when I looked at the printed version, I did not see a comment from him. So it appeared he was not talking to anybody Tuesday night. I thought at that point, okay, it's time to say something. 57% of the voters that day said it's okay, be our mayor. I thought he would come out and talk. So that might suggest he's still really wrestling with this and trying. Of course, the paper reported that it's the duty of the governor of the state of Michigan at this point to remove him from office. So I don't know how that all shakes out.
I filled in on one of the talk shows the other day, and we had a couple of callers on the issue, and there was a sentiment out there. I won't call it the sentiment, but a concern that the people have voted him in office. So, well, this was before the election, but if the people vote him in office, they want him to stay in office. They don't want him to suddenly give up the seat and let somebody else decide who's going to be mayor. The time for deciding who they want to be mayor was election day.
The choices were a little limited at that point.
They were.
It was a strange situation in many ways.
It was. That's for sure. Well, let's shift gears. Let's talk a little bit about
I guess the one other point. It was interesting to me that I mean, almost the unanimous sentiment out there was, he made a mistake, people make mistakes. It's not really relevant to his work as the mayor. That seemed to be the general attitude that showed up in the vote and in public comments, at least things people were willing to say publicly. And I guess I would commend the way the mayor has handled it. He's been very direct, very contrite. He hasn't tried to hide or play games. He came clean immediately. I think it's been admirable. I think, though, somebody could have come forward and said, well, yes, we all have our vices and we all have our struggles, but he was at a candidate forum with voters that evening. I mean, he had just left. And so if he's willing to show up that way, he was campaigning that night. He was speaking to the people of Traverse City in an event organized by the neighborhoods. But nobody seemed to want to look at it that way. I guess John Reed did. But other than that, you mostly heard, well, he made a mistake, but it's separate from his abilities to govern the city.
I don't know. I guess I challenge your comment in that it didn't seem as though he was being direct. I mean, that other than talking to the paper, and apparently he sent the paper an email the morning he got out of jail to let them know this happened. I mean, they got tipped off, from my understanding, by the mayor. But he dodged us. He dodged television for hours, and he's never really been direct because he said from the get-go, I'm not going to talk about this. I'm not going to comment. I'm not going to discuss my legal issues. So to me, that's pretty darn evasive.
Well, but he didn't deny them. I see your point. I guess we need to see what happens next. At some point, he's going to have. If he wants to continue on as the mayor, he's going to have to discuss some things. That I guess I would agree with you. I'm not sure that you have to do it, within the week that things happen.
Sure. Well, and it seemed like that news conference he had, where it wasn't really a news conference. He made a statement. Right. I mean, that would have been the time to do it, to say, this is your moment. Ask the questions, and then I'm going to put it behind me. Instead, it was, I'm not going to take any questions, which just led me to say, well, what are we going to do? 6 months from now, we're talking about the open space. But first, Mayor, let's go back to that incident from October. Yeah. We're going to talk about the splash pad. But first, Mayor, let's go back to that incident that you still haven't addressed.
Right.
And this isn't something that just goes away. He's going to be in court in a few weeks.
Right.
He's going to have follow-up. I mean, there's more to come. So, which also, I guess, gives credence to the theory that at some point he may still step down. This isn't going away.
I guess that's true.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about one of the other big issues on the ballot for a lot of folks, the school bond proposals, not just Traverse City, but we both covered districts all over northern Michigan, most of which, not all, but most of which saw their bond proposals go down in defeat.
Yeah.
Surprised by the TCAPS results?
I was surprised. I was surprised that first bond proposal, the one for roughly $35 million to renovate the elementary schools, do some, I don't know if it was new buses but I think most of that money was going to go for 3 elementary schools, and I was surprised that failed. I thought, well, I did a report that they had done really an excellent job at putting that bond proposal together, doing their outreach first, going out to the community last spring, asking questions, trying to really understand what people objected to in 2012 and what they would be willing to support, and then frame the proposal that way. And the auditorium at Central High School was less of a surprise that it would be defeated, but I was a bit surprised, I think, with everybody. I didn't speak to anyone who saw that coming. I think everybody had the assessment that I had, which turned out to be a naive one, that they had really TCAPS officials had really shepherded this along and done it the right way, and that it was looking good.
An indictment of the school board, of the superintendent's office,
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I think you have a little hangover from last year. I don't know that paying attention to school bond proposals is something that people have a lot of time for, and it's been just 1 year, and there may have been some people who thought, well, this was a bad idea last year, I'm going to vote against it this year, and didn't
know the
really pay attention to the changes. That could be part of the problem. I think in general, it is getting more difficult for schools to pass bond proposals, to ask for money. I think people's default mode, because of the economy, the mood of the nation, people are just more in a default no mode when they go into the booth. And it's long been the case that 30 or 40% of the people are just going to vote no automatically. But I think that and then there's a constituency of parents and supporters of the district that are going to vote yes, and it's that middle group that you have to appeal to, and I think that group may be getting smaller. I think more and more people are harder to convince. The Mears News reported 50% of bond proposals failed statewide, and I talked to Tom White down at the Michigan Association of School Boards, and he said 10, 20 years ago, it was typically more of like a 75% success rate. So the success rate is just down. It's just a tough time for schools to raise money to fix up buildings. Renewals, just renewals of the standing operating millage, those all
seem to go.
Those, I think every single one in Michigan passed, even the increases. Again, that's Mears that reported that, and Suttons Bay and Leland both had their millages renewed. But in terms of bond proposals, in terms of we've got to repair some buildings, we need a new building, we need to pay for it, that's where schools are having difficulty.
Yeah, and Kelly Hall from the TCAP school board told me, and I don't know how they know this or research this, but she said, well, we learned that 50% of our TCAP's parents aren't even registered voters. So, assuming, give her credit for assuming that's true, then how do you get your core base of beneficiaries not only on board, but then to actually show up if they're not even registered to vote? I mean,
right. And I think that also points to another problem that TCAP's had that I reported yesterday that I don't think has gotten much attention, and frankly people don't want to talk about it, and that is that teachers in the district are not very enthusiastic about TCAPs. They're in the middle of contract negotiations. It has not gone well. They've been without a contract since August, which is not unusual, but the sense I got from the offer that TCAPs made in September was it was insulting. In fact, Jeff Leonhardt, who's the head of the TCEA, Traverse City Education Association, used that word, insulting, to describe how teachers felt about the contract that was offered in September. And in general, teachers feel beat up. Every time you turn around, there's some new piece of legislation coming out of Lansing or out of Washington, D.C., explaining how we're going to make teachers do better and how the schools are failing and this is going to fix it. And so teachers are just a little disgruntled. And in an off-year election, it would really help to have 300 teachers energized about a bond proposal, and
very true.
And have them talking to their neighbors, talking to their friends, really pushing for this to happen. And I have no way to gauge exactly how disillusioned they are, but the TCEA took no position on the bond proposal. I can't find out if that is unusual. I can't confirm that they've ever taken a position on a bond proposal, but the president of the union was very direct that they had no position on this, and he had no comment. He personally supported it and voted for it, but he had no comment. But he was willing to discuss the low morale among teachers, and I confirmed with others who wouldn't go on tape that there were some teachers out there that they've just kind of had it. Contract negotiations are not fun. Money is tight, and so they were, shall we say, less than enthusiastic. And that, when the difference is so tiny, I think less than 1% of the vote,
definitely have an impact.
Then that could have been the difference that made a difference.
Interesting. Well, TCAP's not the only one that failed. You mentioned the Leland bond went down.
Well, no, Leland passed. It was Kalkaska and Elk Rapids.
Well, Leland split, though. They had two separate ones.
And they both passed.
I thought one failed and one passed.
No.
I'll have to check on that. But
Leland passed with, I thought, a huge margin of success.
Kalkaska failed,
Yep.
Elk Rapids failed. That one was
Yeah.
fairly close.
And both of those, those were both real narrow margins, like 1 or 2% of the vote.
So maybe that speaks to your broader point, statewide, that people are just feeling it. There's also maybe a concern that nobody really knows nationwide what we're in for. Someone said to me the other day, and I just got my new healthcare packet, and I'm going up $300 a month. I can't imagine paying for new healthcare on top of new new property taxes. Maybe there's just this overwhelming sense of nobody really knows what's coming, so they're a little apprehensive about voting.
I think since 2008, I don't know that there's been a recovery to speak of, despite all the talk of recovery. I think everybody feels a little pinched and a little uncertain, and that's got to be part of it. I think up north too, one of the issues might be, although I don't have any data to confirm this, but it has been, there has been a narrative out there, people looking at demographics and our aging population, and when you retire and you're not around your grandkids who are in school, let's say, you just get more disconnected from the schools, and you're more worried about things like our healthcare system. And so, we're taxing retirement pensions now. So those people may be harder to convince than the general public. And of course, up north, you have a lot of, in places like Elk Rapids, Traverse City, not so much in Kalkaska, but you have a lot of people retiring. You have property values are quite high, driving away families. I mean, the number of children in Traverse City proper is less than it was 10, 20 years ago. And you have more people who have retired up here, and they have their concerns, and it might not be schools. And I think TCAPS has been pretty upfront that they think they have a problem with that group, and they've got to figure out how to make their case to that group of people. So that could be part of it too, especially in a resort town where people want to retire.
Yeah, absolutely.
People who didn't raise their kids here have never had any connection to the schools.
To the TCAPS, yeah, that's a good point. All right, we're going to take a break here on the briefing room. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other stories making news this week, and check in with Peter about what they're working on for Interlochen Public Radio. We'll be right back.
What is Up North TV?
It's TV that you do.
You pick the topic.
You write the script. You run the camera.
You edit the video.
It's your vision.
Your perspective.
Your story.
Commercial free.
Free speech.
What is Up North TV?
It's me.
It's you.
It's all of us.
View us on Analog 97.
Cable digital too.
Digital 992.
UpNorthMedia.org.
Welcome back to the briefing room. I'm Bill Freilich from WTCM Radio News, and joined by Peter Payette from Interlochen Public Radio. Peter, let's talk about another one of the stories that you're working on, that you did work on recently. It's about an event coming up, this coming Monday, right?
Yeah, Monday night. An author will be here who, I think his name is Luis Carlos Montalvan. He wrote a book called Until Tuesday, which is about a service dog named Tuesday. Have you heard of this?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it was quite a big hit, and it was about him. He was a Iraq war veteran and came back, and this dog helped him sort of readjust to life back in the States. So, but he's being brought by a group called AMO, which is an acronym for A Matter of Honor. And the woman who founded this group is a retired lieutenant colonel from the Army, Linda Fletcher. She was an Army nurse and an administrator, obviously. She, in her retirement, has taken a very keen interest in post-traumatic stress disorder. When her father died, she was going through his things and discovered this Silver Star that he had been given for his valor in Italy back in World War II. And when she looked at that, she realized that she had never, I think she found a news article about it, maybe the Star as well, and she realized that they had never talked about that, and then she realized she'd never talked with him at all about his time in the service. And she got to thinking about her father, and apparently he struggled with nightmares and with PTSD. Is her view? She says he would be sitting in his chair watching TV, and maybe there was a loud noise or explosion on TV, and he would hit the deck and come up swinging, as she describes it. And so she determined that he struggled with PTSD his whole life and never had any treatment for it. So she started to research this, and her view is that PTSD is an epidemic. I'm not sure if epidemiologists would apply that term to it. By her count, she figures there's at least 1 million vets in the US that are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And in particular, she was interested in the number of Vietnam vets who still are dealing with it, hundreds of thousands. And that suggests to her, and she would like that to suggest to you and me and everyone else, that we're not really dealing with the problem, that we're misdiagnosing it and mistreating it. So along the way, and she's been at this now about 7 years, she met a woman who had been diagnosed, who was was never in combat, but had been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, I presume from something that happened to her as a young child. And Linda Fletcher, in spending time with this woman, determined that what she really had was dissociative identity disorder, which is what we used to call multiple personalities. And so she saw a connection between these two, and she's come to the view that the diagnosis of PTSD, the prevailing diagnosis since we've acknowledged the disorder, has been wrong, and that we've treated it as an anxiety disorder, and the implications of that are not entirely clear to me. But she's not saying that the troops have multiple personalities, but she's saying they have a sort of lesser version of that, which we call dissociation. And it was interesting that this was a couple of years ago that she met this woman and started on this. And just this year, the mental health community rewrote the DSM, it's DSM-5, now that acronym is failing me, but it is the book that mental health professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists look at to determine what disorders are what.
Yep.
And in that now, the DSM acknowledges some cases of PTSD are dissociative. And by dissociative, it's usually sort of generically described as a detachment from reality. People might feel like they're in a fog. They might see kind of in a tunnel, or they might see themselves as though they're on the outside of their body, looking at themselves, just sort of detached from what's really going on. So Linda Fletcher is encouraged by that. She thinks that it's the heart of the matter. And there are, in some of the psychologists I talked to, one said, and I didn't call the Netherlands, but apparently there's a prominent psychologist in the Netherlands who shares that view, who thinks it's all dissociation. It's all this sort of detachment from reality. It's not a stress disorder, which, if you did view it that way, you would have a different treatment regimen.
Okay.
So anyway, this is her story, and she's founded this group. She believes that what she's doing is nobody else is doing, that the public needs to understand what this disorder is, and there needs, she would like to see the mental health healthcare community come around to this view and really revolutionize the way people are handled with PTSD. She thinks, and others in the profession that I talk to agree, that the dissociation has generally been kind of a little taboo. It's been sort of avoided because those multiple personality cases are so bizarre, and there's some controversy around them. And of course, Hollywood jumps in with movies like Sybil, and makes a lot of hay out of this. And so it's just been a little muddied for that reason. And she thinks that's been a problem, and it's time to sort of get past that and really get down to business and figure out what's happening to these combat veterans that are struggling so much when they get back.
So she's directly involved in bringing the author in on Monday?
She started this group. That's their event, and I don't know what he'll have to say about PTSD. But one of her points is, and I've not read the book. I know very little about him. but one of her points is that there's alternative therapies might gain a little ground if a different view of PTSD was taken, and he, this sort of animal therapy, when you get a dog to nurse yourself back into a more mentally healthy state of mind, that's animal therapy, and so it sort of connects into the area that she's working. So yeah, her group exists to bring public awareness about post-traumatic stress disorder, and part of that, she thinks, is really questioning how the mental health system has dealt with it over the last 20, 30, 50 years.
You remember the details of
Yeah,
Monday?
I believe it is at 6:30 at Bay Point Community Church, which is on the west side of Traverse City.
Okay. Just a real short time left, Peter, a couple minutes. Mackinac Island, you mentioned this story months, if not more than a year ago. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. Just give us the update on this potential for a hotel, right, as you get off the docks.
Right, so the developer who has really kind of upset a lot of people on the island, his name is Ira Green. He's developed at least one hotel, was under construction when I was there last year in the winter. He had one under construction, he had a permit for another. He was applying to build another, and this was the one that would be right in front of the Arnold Line ferry, the oldest ferry on the island. The island last January created historic districts downtown. So now, if you want to tear down an old building, you can't just do it. You need approval. I did not cover this meeting, but his approval was denied back in August, maybe September, and the appeal deadline was yesterday. So he has to make the next move. I don't know if he appealed or what is happening, but
he has to appeal to that.
He has to appeal that decision
on the island.
Yes, I believe it's an internal. No, I'm sorry. It goes to Lansing. It'll be an appeal in Lansing. I assume to the SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office. I would assume they are the ones. But don't quote me on that, even though we're on TV. But my understanding is the appeal will be in Lansing to the decision of this commission that is on the island that said there's not just cause to tear down these buildings that he wants to tear down to build this hotel, which would be right there when you get off the Arnold Line ferry.
Well, my recollection was, two parts. So one, the whole island could theoretically be a historic district, and two, there was this question about whether this group was formed specifically for the purpose of preventing this hotel or others like it.
Hotels are definitely the issue because what's been happening, it's what they call infilling. The island, property on the island is very valuable, and so developers like Ira Green find an older building. McNally Cottage was the one that caused a lot of controversy. It's smaller, it's old, it was fairly run down, and would have cost a fair amount to bring back. He demolished it and filled a hotel in that. So it's starting to change the streetscape there. Yeah. And Ira Green will tell you they're working within the same spirit that you can't freeze it in time, and that his work and other new developments on the island add to the character, the changing character of Mackinac Island. And some island residents say no, he's destroying it. And certainly this project, that many people know that spot where you get off the Arnold Ferry line, and there are the bikes that you can rent, and it's open now. When I saw it last December, you would walk underneath an arch, and there would be hotel rooms with balconies up above you. So this would be a major change of that location. There's nothing, I don't believe there's anything in the districts that says you can't infill open space. But he also wants to tear down a building or two on to either side of that open area, and that's what he needs permission now from the island to do. So I think it's fair to say that a lot of this was about his projects, but there are others. I can't remember the name of the developer, but someone else, when I was there last December, was proposing to tear down an existing building to build a large B&B. So there's others that are bringing investment to that island and are looking to develop, because it's, even though they say the traffic is not what it was 15 years ago, a lot of people go to Mackinac Island. Yeah. for 7 months out of the year or whatever.
Well, Peter, we'll obviously want to keep tabs on that story. We'll hopefully get an update next time you're in. I want to thank you for coming back
pleasure.
again this week. Thanks everyone for tuning into the briefing room as well. I'm Bill Freilich from WTCM Radio and Peter Payette from Interlochen Public Radio. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next time on the briefing room.